The World Tomorrow. The Worldwide Church of God presents Herbert W. Armstrong.
And I'm here to bring you the truth. No one else is telling you the things that God is telling you through me. He's speaking through me.
The Lord let me experience what it is to be a new bride. You know, I'm not worried about what I'm about to say, though it may be graphic. We're coming to the Lord, and if you can take it, beyond the veil is the chamber. That's the wedding chamber. The Lord told me that.
But from then on, visions begin to come. When this comes up on me, it produces a vision. I'm able to tell people what's wrong with them, what they must do in life, and the sins that they are holding back in their life.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cult Next Door podcast. Before we get started, as always, I want to remind you all to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all them places where the kids are. We're there. We also have a new way for you to connect with us, which has been pretty cool. We've had a few of these come in the past week or 10 days, whenever it was that we unveiled this, but it is a way that you can leave us a voice message with a question or a comment, and we may feature it on the show. So if you have something you want to say and you don't want to write it, you can just click the link that's at the top of the description of this episode. And it's also in our Instagram bio, and you can leave us a voice message. Just get sent straight to our email, and we may put it on the show if it's good. Also want to do our double portion club shout outs real quick before we get started. Shanda and Chase, thank you both. Heather Bartlett, and then Carla, thank you all for supporting the podcast. You deserve your shout out. If you guys want to be in that double shout out or double portion shout out club, it's $10 a month to get ad free episodes and the shout out, or you can do a $5 a month tier and you'll get the free episodes, and we'll send you a really cool Cult Next Door holographic sticker. Now I'm going to read our rating and review. This is a good 1-star, and this is a good segue into today's episode. I love this one. I woke up to this morning, so it was a nice 8 a.m. wake up.
Happy
I look at my
Sunday.
phone. Yeah, thank you, whoever this is. The name they left was Too Many Episodes. So I don't know who you are, but I appreciate this. It says boring, depressing, badly produced. I really tried to get into this podcast, but after listening to about 5 or 6 episodes, you realize this show is just a substituted therapy for the host to talk about their dad, how their dad was mean and strict to them. So that's a good segue into today's episode, which I am just going to go ahead and make an executive decision. Today's episode is going to be titled Substituted Therapy with Blake Moore. So Blake, thank you for joining us for your therapy session today.
I love it because, to be fair to the review, it feels a little bit like therapy getting to chat.
Oh, for sure.
It's cool. And it might be depressing sometimes.
And also, our dad was not only mean to us, but mean to you too. So
Yeah.
What's interesting about that actually is I was like terrified of him, but like I've always been like aside from a couple of things, I've always been the way I was raised in Worldwide and by my parents, and just my genetic makeup is like I'm type A, like rule follower, terrified of authority. I think some of that comes from the church, but I'm just not the test the boundaries type of kid. So I never crossed your dad seriously, and he never really had to take my head off for anything like I've seen him do, but I still lived under the fear of that, and I was still manipulated and abused, had scripture weaponized against me. Like, so I still, like, it all still applies to me, like in some respects, but no, I can't make claim to the specific challenges you guys can, growing up with him, for sure.
and I guess to address that review, you know, my thought is that if that is the way that it hits you, then like you probably aren't here for that. And maybe we talked about this earlier, but maybe you're listening to the podcast for pure entertainment. And there are definitely podcasts out there like that. Like I think Was I in a Cult? It does a really good job of like lightheartedly talking about cults and high control situations that people have found themselves in, where yeah, there's just still some difficult things that you might hear, but there is a light side to it that they present, and we don't really do that very much. Like,
Yeah.
we are really pretty raw, I feel like, with, our experiences, and the purpose behind that is really to provide people with full context and kind of like see our full range of feelings and experiences, and maybe they see themselves in our situations. And so that's, I mean, people can listen for whatever reason they want to, but like, that's our purpose, why we're doing it. But it doesn't bother me if it's not for everyone, because I never thought
Yeah.
it would be,
Yeah. It's kind of a fly on the wall style. It's different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everybody doesn't come from a cult, like this show kind of is a connection point for validation for people that have been in a similar situation, or maybe to pull the veil back on if there's something dangerous that you're encountering, it's not
Yeah.
just pure entertainment. Like it's going to resound with the intended audience. It's not going to for everybody.
And as a quick clap back to whoever this was that left the review, 350,000 downloads would disagree with you. So take that. Both barrels.
Mic
Except
drop.
they're not listening
No.
anymore
Yeah.
because it's boring and they already listened to
Yeah.
this many.
Yeah. And it's mostly okay.
Oh boy. Okay, so I meant to look back and see when was the last episode that we dropped with you, Blake. Do you happen to know off the top of your head?
I want to say it was midsummer, so June or July. I think it was June of last
Okay.
year.
Okay, because I thought it has to be coming up on a year, if not already a year. And my idea from the beginning, or my thought, was it would be cool to check in like a year later and see where you are, and kind of get a snapshot of what your year has been like, because we're all on this healing journey and a lot can happen in a week sometimes when you're talking about healing and processing everything that we went through. But I'm sure a lot's happened over the last year. And so I thought it would be cool to have a conversation where we talk about what you've been doing, what you found that's helped, and maybe things that haven't helped. Like, it's all a learning process.
That's interesting. I haven't really thought about things that haven't helped.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, wow.
Well, the hard
That's a big
drugs didn't
question.
help.
You know what? That's a good point. Definitely dabbled in the drugs. Um,
uh,
I, I I thought about taking up drinking seriously, and I decided not to.
Professionally.
Cut back on the alcohol a little bit. No joke. That's primarily because it affects my sleep, and sleep is like the foundation of mental and physical health. And
yeah.
so I try to drink sparingly. Um, Still really enjoy it. But what hasn't worked? What has worked? Or what has things been like? So you want a recap of the last year? That's a cool question because if you had asked me 3 months ago or 6 months ago,
Mhm.
like how much farther along I am, like healing and whatnot, I would have given you things still suck pretty bad.
Mhm.
Um, because it's really it's like progress with everything. Like weight loss is like this, dieting, fitness, finances are like this, like they're building a business, like there's this like a lot of little ups and downs that feels very stagnant, and then you'll see like a spike of dividends paid out. Like
Mhm.
'cause I used to do personal training, so I worked with a lot of clients, and you'll see people like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, they feel like they're spinning the wheels, you're frustrated, like nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden, you're getting all these comments from people that haven't seen you in a while. It's like, you've lost so much weight or whatever, like
Yeah.
there's this
Yeah.
big, like you notice the result like all at once. And I'm almost scared to say anything positive because how long have you been at this, Ashley? Like 25 years or something? I've been at it like, I don't know, 4 or 5 4. You
Well,
know
just
that
really quick, remember I avoided for years, so I would not say that I was actively working on healing that whole entire time. I think it kinda went in spurts, and then I would tire out and kind of set that down and go
Which I
back
think
to, like, let's not think about that. Um, yeah, so it
I think
hasn't been continuous.
that's part of the process though, right? Is you can
Mhm.
only handle so much at a time, and
Mhm.
the rest of life doesn't let up. It's like
Right,
this is
right.
one stress and difficulty dealing with processing and healing from trauma. I mean, what else you gonna
Yeah.
call it? Like, and life has all of the other stresses and strains and things that keep you busy and exhausted all of the
Mhm.
time. So you have to juggle and manage it all. So like there's only so much you can take on at any given time. Like when
Mhm.
you asked me what hasn't worked, I was going to say, well, avoiding things doesn't work. Um, but that's only true long term because technically you've got to put stuff on a shelf sometimes.
Yeah, you
Speaking
do.
of which, super excited. I just learned from a therapist like 2 or 3 weeks ago about the containment method. Have you ever heard of that?
Mhm.
I think it's so cool because it literally gives you the tool to like concretize difficult emotional things within your nervous system, and you visualize it, and you can put it in a box and lock it away and avoid it.
Mhm.
But it's supposed to be temporary. Like you can't avoid it
Yeah.
long term. It's just to like to get through. But it's really really cool.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was kind of scared to say anything positive about like I'm great now because like you can feel that way, and then like everything can turn around on you like 180 the other way. Like it is just peaks and valleys. Hopefully with like this long-term upward trend. But yeah, so a few months ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said it everything's still pretty terrible. But I've very, very recently, so like a month or two, feel like I kind of turned this corner where I can see a lot more light in the journey
Mm.
past a lot of the darkness where there were things that were really intense triggers for me that have disappeared, like completely dissipated or like vastly diminished anyway. Yeah, I don't know. We'd probably have to sort through.
so. You mentioned the triggers. I mean, are there any in particular that you can think of that you're comfortable sharing? You know, you were mentioning like it kind of changed over the last month or two. Was it just the internal work that made that change for you? Like, what were they, and why do you think like the switch was flipped?
Yeah, 100%. It was internal work, like just a lot of internal work. What I was about to say was really have to rewind and just kind of walk through like specific circumstances. I think uh, for me to piece it all together, I wasn't really prepared for such an encompassing question, like, "How's the last year been?" Um, Especially since I'm not really great at big generalities, like, I'm
Yeah.
detail-oriented, very specific, but the internal work is huge, so, like, bottom line is I've been bounced between weekly and biweekly, for the most part, therapy sessions for
Mhm.
3 or 4 years. I'm not exactly sure when I started,
Mhm.
and I know that that sucks for some people, and I'm kinda weird that I really and joy is probably too positive a connotation, word for it, but I really glean a lot of satisfaction from understanding how things work, why, having all the information behind it, and I like processing through understanding in general, and I like talking. Um, that being said, therapy is painful, right? Like, you end up
Mhm.
crying plenty, and you end up with the nervous system producing intense tension in your neck or wherever you hold it, and it can leave you feeling a little wrecked physically. So can these recording sessions, by the way,
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
the one star review people. It's like this isn't just fun, like it kind of hurts. Um,
Yeah.
but, it's not boring to us. To us, it's very for real. Um, yeah, so I really I don't know how most people, especially anyone that's been through, what we've been through, something that intense, carry on with life in any sort of a healthy, normal way without doing extensive therapy. I really don't get it because to me, it seems absolutely fundamentally necessary. I don't know how you avoid it.
What what do you feel like it is with therapy that helps so much?
I think there's a few things, like you and I were talking this week, right, about
Mhm.
how so much of therapy is really just being heard, the process
Mhm.
of being able to externalize uh, thoughts and feeling really deep feelings that most people, maybe none of us are well able to fully comprehend. Like you don't
Right.
understand what you're feeling until you've been forced to get it out somehow. Like writing can be really great for a lot of people, but the externalizing and being heard and then being validated in
Yes.
what you feel, I think is probably the biggest. I'm no specialist, but I think it's probably the biggest component of why it's helpful. Um, and then having just another lens and perspective on, like
Mhm.
for us, you guys can probably identify with this, right? You you go through living your life in this type of situation, and so much of it is just normal to you.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know of it another way. Like, we joked for years about, like, "Oh, everyone from the outside probably thinks, like, we're in a cult," right? Like, I remember that being a joke, like, we seem kind of extreme, like, we're
Mhm.
in a cult.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we truly believed that we had, like, the one truth and we had it all right, and then the systems, the toxic systems that we operated within, it was just normal, like, we thought we were in the right situation, and
Yeah.
so it's not till you go through the trauma of, having to leave it and recognizing some things, but you just recognize a few things, right? This is I don't know if this is true for y'all, but it's like you just scratched the tip of the iceberg when you decide, "I've gotta leave, like, this isn't good anymore," and then it's 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 just like an avalanche after that, like each block that gets pulled out from the tower, you just learn more and more about how not normal the whole situation was.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think the externalizing, the validation of being heard, but for me, it's a huge component also just to be able to understand what it was, like, what's making me
Mhm.
feel this way, like, why am I feeling this,
Mhm.
uh, and then you get legitimate tools for how to deal with difficult stuff, and that's something that, makes me a little more, extreme than your average person, is that maybe I have ADHD is what my doctor's telling me now, but I kinda hyper focus and fixate on whatever I'm interested in,
Mhm.
and I'm always been interested in, like, self-care and wellness, kinda comes from a fitness obsession, I think. So, once I start diving into self-care and, like, mental health, I go deep, and I'm like, "What is every possible tool that I could be using?" Like, I love Andrew Huberman's podcast, and
Mhm.
things like this, so I've I've taken up quite a lot of things at the same time to try to get better and
Yeah.
manage because honestly, the consequences of some of its personality, nature versus nurture, I don't know,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
the growing up in this type of religious system and then my years spent at Crusade Church for sure, insane amounts of anxiety, some depressive disorder stuff, a lot of unprocessed grief.
Mhm.
Uh, for me, a really huge component with grieving for a really long time, or that it wasn't dealt with, that I literally had to recognize through therapy, is this type of trauma affects some people differently, and some people get wounded deeper, and it literally can wreck your physical health. And so Sarah and I live every day with physical challenges health-wise. Ashley, I know you know what this is like too, that I mean, it
Mhm.
impacts your life in a big way, and I've just there's been a lot of emotion to deal with, let's put it that way. A lot of stuff that just sucks, you know?
Yeah. Well, this may be partially cultural as well, but I do think within the church context, we really don't learn how to grieve. That was
No,
something
or
that we talked about with Seth in one of our last conversations with him, had to do with grieve and how to grieve losses. We were speaking in the context of actually losing a loved one, because I think it's pretty common in Christianity to employ these grief bypassing measures by, well, they're, we're going to see them again. They're not in pain. Like, you think of all these reasons why you shouldn't be grieving and going through that process. But the reality is that's going to live in your body no matter what. Like that, you either grieve and you process it, or you're going to be dealing with the consequences of not doing that, whether you realize it or not.
definitely. Yeah, definitely, and it extends beyond just grief. We were
Mhm.
not I don't know if I wanna say allowed, but yeah, I'll just use that for lack of a better word at the moment. We were not allowed to hold on to negative emotion, period,
Well,
or
yeah. Yeah.
we you were taught to deny it, like, it's
Mhm.
bad to have it is the
Yeah.
overall
Yeah.
perception that I grew up with, is that man, I can't tell you, in particular degree for struggling with negative emotion over, um, health challenges, or yeah, so some serious stuff there. I can't tell you how many times I felt guilty and ashamed of being like failing at being a strong enough Christian with a strong enough faith to not have these negative emotions. Like
Mhm.
I was screwing up for
Mhm.
feeling negative things. So whether it's grief or anger or bitterness or sadness, like being sad is not okay, because it's like you
Yep.
said, like things are twisted out of context and you're just supposed to bypass all that with a and it's just not the whole picture. Like there is some validity to, I don't know, just call it positive thinking if you want to put everything in a nutshell.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
uh so and so's in a better place, or they're not in pain anymore, or
Mhm.
uh maybe I'm in a challenging spot today, but there's somebody in a worse place, like I've actually got a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
there's there's a rightness to gleaning from things like that. Like, yes, gratitude is very helpful, but that doesn't exclude like that's just one half of it is what it is. Like you have to process and deal with the negative thing that you feel, and it's not wrong and it's not bad. You don't pick your emotions really. You're going to experience emotions, good and bad. Like we didn't create them. They just rise up. Like, we get to choose what we deal with them, but denying them, pretending they don't exist, or feeling guilty for having them is not only is it not doing you any good, it's doing a lot of harm.
Yeah, and you're denying a part of yourself. So, in essence, you aren't living a full human experience when you're doing that. You're cutting off a piece of yourself, in the bypassing, which I think, like, with therapy, that is one of, like, what you said about therapy, having a safe space to be heard and validated is so important. But it is also, it's a place where your full range of emotion is accepted and valued. And I think that was one of the really important parts of therapy for me and my growth, was realizing I can come into this space with all of me, even the parts that I think are ugly, or that I think, um, I shouldn't have, I'm going to just lay all this out. And then to have somebody see that, hear that, and not shame you for it, but just accept you as you are in that moment is really important, I think, for how we self actualize, how we see ourselves, and how we process things going forward. I think that's kind of also what you were saying about the therapeutic relationship.
I actually wasn't even thinking about that specifically, but when you said that just now, that really I could think of specific instances where there's something that you felt that you're not happy that you felt like it. I
Hmm.
don't know if I want to say shameful per se, but there's an element of you don't even want to say it out loud for yourself. You know what
Right,
I mean? Like
right.
admit to the
Yeah.
fact that that's what you feel,
Oh,
but
yeah.
the freedom of being able to do so, you're like, I don't even want to say this, but I feel like this. I feel like this.
Yeah.
And to have someone hear that and not look at it with any judgment or
Mm-mm. Yeah.
it, yeah, it's a big deal, especially when it's something that when they can say honestly back to you, of course you feel that way. You know,
Right.
this situation is terrible, so of course you feel like that. And
Yes.
that's
Oh
normal.
gosh. And my therapist says that exact line all the time. I will say how I feel about something, and if it's something that shame is attached to, I will oftentimes follow that up with, like, I don't know why I feel that way. Like, I you know what I mean? I'm trying desperately to understand, like, where is that coming from so I can get rid of it. And that really, it really helps to have her say, "Well, of course you feel that way."
Yes, it does.
It's just like, oh, and I realized in that relationship, in that therapeutic relationship, that's kind of all I ever needed in my whole entire life growing up. Anytime, I'm sure you feel the same way, both of you, like, just to have had somebody say, yeah, of course you're feeling down. Like, this is a hard situation. And like, I do that to my kids, and every time, there's an interaction like that, I feel grateful to have at least had that the last, several years of my life, someone who could, like, provide that for me, that I didn't get that before. And so now then I can, like, do that with the people that are important to me, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I think it helps us, but then it helps us be better in our own relationships, because we want to give back what we've been given.
Oh, definitely. Like Sarah and I have been learning like more and more like to do that with each other.
Yeah.
Um, just like that validation of, yeah, what you're feeling, it makes total sense. Like that's okay. And
Yes. Yes.
especially raising Elise, like she's a big feeler. Like she's
Yes.
feeling whatever she's feeling intensely. And I don't know how this works. I don't know what the genetic component is. And I think there are studies now showing some element of trauma that can be genetically expressed and passed down.
Mhm.
Like you don't actually have to have experienced yourself,
Yeah.
but your parent could have experienced it. So I don't know how those two things interact versus what your child is learning from watching you. But
Mhm.
like I realized very quickly that I was way too late to the game for perfectly fixing all of these issues so that she doesn't learn them uh, from us, right?
Yeah.
So I can see her like already experiencing shame or
Mhm.
self-consciousness that you wish like she wouldn't. It's like, wait a minute, why are you feeling that? Uh, like, hopefully we didn't teach you to feel that already, or make you feel
Yeah.
that. So it's
Yeah.
I'm definitely thankful to be look. It feels too late already, honestly,
Mm.
but it's much earlier than I'm coming to it, right? So thankful to learn a lot of this now to be able to start catching it early with her and letting her feel what she's feeling, because that
Yeah.
was that was something that was that I think I grew up with. It's not like a wicked or like an evil thing, but trying to manage other people's emotions, like trying to make everything
Mhm.
okay. Like, "Oh, you're feeling
Yes.
sad. Oh, let's don't feel sad. Like, let's try to fix
Right.
that." It's like, "No, you actually need to feel it first." You
Yes.
know, you don't just need to stop it and like circumvent it. Like, you need to let someone feel it. Yeah. Does that happen to you? Like, I think this happens to a lot of people, just in any relationship or conversation, but or like in therapy, if you start to cry over something or like you're going to lose control and you apologize for it. Like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like, why do we do that? Like,
I
why
know,
do you have
I've had
to?
to learn to stop doing that because I used to do that in therapy. And my therapist commented the other day because I will just like I'll literally be like, "Well, good morning, and I'm here with my Kleenexes." And sometimes she laughs because I'm literally like, "I know I'm gonna cry already, so here we go." Um, but she mentioned the other day, she said, "You didn't cry for a long time," something to that effect, like, like like even my body language, I'm like trying to hold it together and I'm trying to be quote unquote appropriate and so much more okay with crying now and not apologizing for it and just letting myself feel that if that's what I need to do. And that's been
Yeah.
so helpful. Cause I mean, how many times, even Matt, like, dad would spank us. And then it's like, you weren't supposed to cry.
Yeah.
Because that was like feeling sorry for yourself, right?
That's
Self-pity.
exactly right. Yeah, that was the term that was used. Like we don't feel sorry for ourselves. So
But it
no
actually hurt
crying.
like hell. So there was that. Like, you're literally being like harmed physically and emotionally.
We probably all to a degree, and especially like Blake, when you were in Crusade, like you are not only having to learn how to manage your own emotion and what is a
Mhm.
an emotion that you can show or can't show,
Mhm.
but also the added wrinkle of like managing the other person. And in this case, usually it was dad because that was kind of the volatile personality there in the mix. There were some others, but that was the big one where you're managing your own but also trying to gauge that and manage that person. So it's like you're always on guard internally and externally, which I think once you're out of that, it's almost like for me, like glad to be out of it, but like, well, what do I do with myself now? Like, how do I occupy my mind, which I still struggle with. I'm not going to get on
Mm.
like a whole
Mhm.
side thing, but maybe we can talk about this part later.
Mhm.
But I'm getting better about it now, but like having to have music or TV or something like going on all the time
Mm.
as a distraction. And I've told Liz before, like music in the car when I'm driving or something to occupy my mind, because
Mm.
times when I haven't, in a 20-minute drive, I'll bend myself completely out of shape thinking about something that happened 10 years ago or whatever. So it's like I am learning how to manage that, but I think that's part of it too that maybe I don't know that we've
Do you
talked about, but it's just a
I'm
weird
so glad you brought that
thing.
up. That's a really good point because that's a specific highlight in my healing journey or whatever, is needing to distract. Like, especially when if I was working out in the field a lot in the past, cutting grass and that type of thing, um, I've got all day long, like, with nothing to do but think or listen to something. And I definitely spent a lot of time, well, my whole life really, but especially the past few years, distracting myself from not thinking by I would burn out on music pretty quick throughout the course of a day if I could do it all day long. So podcasts, like I would be learning something, like I would binge a few different podcasts and just all day long I had to have something. And then I remember a couple of years ago, and a point I was going to make earlier, this ties together. I was I was describing a lot of the difficult stuff that the results are of the trauma of living in a cult and exiting it. extreme anxiety and depressive stuff, just some real issues to face. And I was talking about how I'll hyper focus and kind of deep dive on, okay, what is every self care thing I could possibly do? So part of my problem is I've tried, a dozen plus different things, and a lot of them all at the same time. So I can't always pinpoint exactly
You're like,
what
what's
worked
working?
and what helps. Something is helping a little bit right now. I'm not sure what it is, uh, but so the point of that connecting with, distraction and music or podcasts, information in general, is, I've tried a handful of different supplements, like, to try to manage anxiety and stress
Mhm.
response and some of this stuff, and I went through a period of time. I remember bringing this up in therapy. I was like, "I haven't wanted to listen to anything while I was working for, like, a month now." Like, I
Wow.
preferred the silence,
Mm.
and they were like, "Oh, maybe you're finally" you know, calming down inside, like you've got less.
Mhm.
I can't remember exactly what she said. Like I was becoming more comfortable with like a peace and a stillness that before was, well, it's non-existent really, because it's like you're saying, Maddie, if you don't have something distracting you, like my mind is just running nonstop, like rampant. And it might not be about anything terrible, or it might be. It's usually gonna be something anxiety provoking, but it's exhausting is what it is. Like,
Mhm.
sometimes it's stuff that you just don't wanna deal with, you don't wanna be alone with your thoughts, or sometimes it's just too many thoughts in general. And so it was a really bizarre experience for me for the first time in my life to realize there's an attractiveness to stillness and quiet that I'd never known before. And I think that was a result of some supplements I was trying, um, because it hasn't been totally permanent. How is this for you, Maddie? Like, is it still that way? You said you're getting better at it. Are you kinda up and down with it?
Yeah, I think probably like you described earlier, like the peaks and the valleys, but I feel like it's on an upward trend where I can do that more consistently, where I don't have to have something. And even, I mean, even a step for me, which is kind of sad, but like I've got a whole, well, some of these back here, like a whole bunch of books. Liz got me a whole bunch of books for Christmas and my birthday because I wanted books. And I even had on my little like New Year's resolution thing, like, I want to read a book a month. Well, I didn't crack one open until this week. It's March. But even that, like, it's easier for me to uh, be get in my head when I'm reading a book in the quiet than it is if there's music or a show. So I've avoided that. I think for that reason.
Mm.
So now,
Interesting.
like, I crack the book open, like I'm able and I'm making conscious effort uh to not have noise or something distracting like in the background on. So it is getting better, and I know at least I am able to obviously I know that that's a problem for me, which I guess is the first step to say this isn't healthy. I'm not dealing with some of this like I need to. I'm just avoiding it, and that's not going to be good. I'm not going to get better at dealing with it by avoiding it forever. Like you said, that for a time, maybe you can put it in a box, but you can't do that forever.
So if something pops up that's, like, not something that you would be something that you would not want to have to think about, how do you deal with that now? Like, something really unpleasant comes up in your mind during those times, and then what?
Mm, like during the quiet times.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know specifically how I would describe what I do. I think just generally, I've tried to with a lot of this stuff, including like with how we're doing the podcast. It's just like instead of trying to find like a place to hide, it's just like turning towards it, like almost like
Yeah.
getting in its
Like
face, where it's like,
like,
okay,
"Hey."
like let's do it then, like let's talk about it, kind of thing. And so like let
Yeah.
myself do that and know um, that if I let it, it will have an effect on me that I don't want. And I guess what I mean by that is, like if I drive in the car and don't have anything on, like when my mind is wandering, that's when I feel like I have the trouble where I'll get
Mhm.
triggered by whatever and get to thinking. But when I know, uh, I guess like when I'm fight ready, when I know it's time, like
Yeah,
it's easier
yeah.
for me to just like, okay, let's do it then. If that makes sense. That's probably.
You would probably really like the containment method if you checked it out, because what's really cool is it gives you the option. To me, the hard part is finding the time where you just have, well, it's harder if you have kids. The time, available where it's a good moment to deal with something difficult.
Mhm.
Because what's cool about the containment method is, like, it can come up and it really gives you this handle to leverage on, like, "Wait a minute, I'm gonna put this thing in this box, and then I don't have to think about it right now," and you get the break from that, and then you get to pick the moment when it's like, "Okay, I'm gonna open this up, and I'm gonna look at it," like you said, when you're fight ready and go, because like, what therapists teach with this is, like, tie it to self-care. So, a
Mhm.
lot of girls like hot baths, so that's what they recommend, but, like, you do a bath time routine where you've got your wine or whatever. This is not what I do, because 'cause I've only tried this actually, like, 3 times, so I still feel like I'm trying to I got the containment part great, but I still feel like I'm exploring what it is to open it back up and find the moment to really, really deal with it. But in general, just the day to day, I know you wanted to talk about this, Ashley. I feel, like I said, I do too many things at once, so I never know exactly what's the best producer of the best results, what's coming from. But I'm on a 38, 39-day streak of meditating for the first time ever,
Mhm.
10 minutes a day, first thing in the morning, and I absolutely love it because, and this goes
Mhm.
hand in hand with the distraction and then the stillness. I've had a historically impossibly hard time being able to do that. Like, tell me to sit
Mhm.
still and try not to think, like, it it has never worked for me. Finally found an app that helped. It was like they had a
Mhm.
7-day course that kinda walked you into it, easily, and I was just blown away at how much easier it was. But I think, like you asked me to begin with, it is just like a turning of a corner all of a sudden, like, you put in a lot of work, and then now it's kinda working. Like, now you see
Mhm.
some result. So for me, I feel like it's that plus the therapy and the inner work, right? It's that plus the practice over time of leaning into, like you were just saying, Maddie, like whatever this thing is, like whatever you're feeling in the moment, turning towards it and leaning into it instead of distracting or avoiding it or shoving it down somewhere, uh, that just makes it worse. And it blows my mind, this concept of radical acceptance. If you guys have heard of that, where you
Mhm.
just look at what it is, no matter how terrible it is, and you accept it for what it is.
Mhm.
Because I have this instinct to fight it and want to change it.
Mhm.
Like, and maybe it's a normal human instinct, or maybe we're especially ingrained with this and the environment we're coming from here. But uh, the resistance to feeling anything negative or bad, like it's just not okay, is huge. So I resist it and fight it, and I try to change it naturally. But the shift that happens when you turn towards it and let yourself feel it and just accept it, or that's talking about a feeling, but call it a bad situation. Like, maybe your health is completely wrecked because of this, and you fought really, really hard to try to change that, and that doesn't work. It makes it worse. Look at it and accept it. It's like, I haven't changed it. Maybe I can't do anything about it. Maybe, you've forever, sorry, this is deep and rough. You forever lost a relationship with your father. You never
Mhm.
are going to have what you wished you would have had, or name the circumstance that uh, somebody is going through with all this. Accept it.
Yeah.
And that practice of doing that, coupled with for a long time now. I'm serious. I feel like this takes a few years
Mhm.
before you even come close. Because I would never venture to say right now that like, "Oh, I've got this. I'm good at it." Would not say that. But I can notice progress at having practiced for a few
Mhm.
years this concept. And now coupled with meditation, because I don't know how much this resonates with every person, but being very anxious and depressed and pretty easily, what's the, catastrophizing, right?
Mhm.
When
Mhm.
things are, like, not feeling good and it feels like the whole world is caving in on you. That happens to me pretty easily, naturally. So this concept of leaning into things, accepting them, and meditating, I feel like I have this newfound ability to I almost view it like stepping back away from
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
meditation gives you this ability, right? You become an observer, a
Yes.
spectator of your thoughts.
Mhm.
Like, you don't identify so closely with them as if they are you.
Right.
You view them as, like, these clouds that are passing by or
Mhm.
these waves that you can choose to ride or not, and that ability, man, it's just been huge to me, and again, I only feel like I'm maybe 20% good at it out of 100, okay?
Do you
But
feel like you do this now outside of meditation? Because
yes.
I feel like I
Yeah.
started it in meditation, and
Right.
now it is really almost like, something that I automatically do, especially if it's something that's really difficult that's happening. I literally kind of almost I'm, like, just observing it almost out of body sometimes, and I'm just like, "Okay, this is happening right now."
Mhm.
And it
Absolutely.
is that acceptance of it, and it's like, "Okay, this is what's going on, and this is what I'm dealing with," as opposed to panicking. I'm not saying I'm doing this perfectly. I'm just saying
No, no.
that happens more and more and more where I can take that aspect of meditation into, like, real life.
Definitely, and I
Right,
think
yeah.
it's a combination of the two principles, the meditating and turning towards difficult things, like allowing yourself
Mhm.
to experience them. To me, like, it's both, that go hand in hand, but it does feel like a throughout the day higher ability, like, I wouldn't call it automatic yet, but definite progress, like, it's like an ability that never used to exist before that I can
Right.
remember more quickly,
Right.
more and more quickly to utilize. It's like, "Wait a minute, step back," and then
Yeah.
just be okay with being still and quiet and
Mhm.
observing,
And you're
and
not getting
for me
fully encompassed by whatever feeling that is or whatever circumstance you're in. It's not overtaking your whole mind and body and everything about you. It's more of a you can almost objectively view it, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can, and then for me, it gives this perspective in the moment and across time that I can look back and say, "Yeah, there's this situation, and it
Mhm.
it it makes me wanna feel like this, it feels bad,
Mhm.
but everything is not bad because yesterday there was a different situation and everything was feeling pretty good," right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
why all of a sudden that seems like that never happened or that's never gonna happen again, and then I can look back and it's like, the last time a situation like this came up, it felt like the world was ending, but it didn't. Everything was okay.
Right.
It just gives
Right.
this, um, greater perspective, like a bigger picture perspective, which is super helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And it reminds me of what Dr. Laura Anderson said, like the sun rises still every day. Like I actually do remind myself of that. And I almost feel like with the meditation, I have to, it does give you that almost outside perspective where it's like these things happen and then they end or they pass or whatever it is. And then there's a new day and there
I
are
tell
new
myself that is like
situations.
I'll tell myself it's gonna feel different in a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yes.
Like, maybe
Yeah.
not today, maybe tomorrow,
Yeah.
maybe that, but it's gonna feel different.
Right.
I heard a really cool quote, um, Kevin O'Leary, I'm a big Shark Tank fan, so he's a tycoon, shark,
Mhm.
investor on there, and somebody interviewed him, and he was talking about he deals with so many different businesses and entrepreneurs, and so he gets a lot of calls, and some days, like, everything is going fantastic and everybody's making a ton of money, or there's this huge problem and you're losing a ton of money, or it could be total disaster. And he said, "I've learned over time, the only difference between feeling fantastic and feeling terrible is just a little bit of time." So it's like, if you just
Yeah.
step back and wait for a minute, this thing will pass and then you'll be feeling great again. So you just kinda
Right.
have to wait for a sec.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that's one thing that meditation teaches. To me, that's been the most invaluable tool for healing. And I think, obviously, like you said, so many modalities work better together when they're alongside each other. And so you get there's greater impact to you. But yeah, the therapy, the therapeutic relationship, and then the meditation, the two of those things, like I would not want to do without.
I definitely agree, and I don't like, coming across like, giving advice. I'm no expert on any of this, but some of it's hard for me to, to separate because I've done it for so long,
Mhm.
but I know a lot of people don't. So, I would mention that I don't think I would survive without exercise. Like, I notice a huge
Yeah.
difference
Mhm.
in my mental state if I don't do it. Like, I'm
Yeah.
kind of addicted is the wrong word. It's like a medicine I have to take. Like, I didn't start exercising for that reason 15, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, 20 years ago. I had your standard, uh, self-conscious, insecurities and vanity issues for it. But the past 5 years or so, I have
Mhm.
realized all that could go away, like, strictly the mental health benefit of moving
Well,
and
yeah, like move your
the
body, change your mind. I mean,
definitely.
that's real. I agree with that. Exercise has been an important outlet for me and way of processing even before, I ever started therapy. I think it was something I gravitated towards as a healing modality without really understanding that's what I was doing, you know? But I do feel like meditation is just a different level. It's more like a conscious, like understanding of like, I am not my thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm
The
not.
difference exercise is like a physical lever you can pull to have an effect on,
Yeah.
like, your chemistry within your body, and
Mhm.
then meditation is like a mental lever,
Mhm.
slash emotional, I guess, that you can pull to have an effect on how things are feeling is probably how I would look at it.
Yeah. Yesterday, was it yesterday? Yeah, it was. I woke up and I just felt in a funk. I mean, I can't even explain why. There wasn't anything specific. They're just, there are stresses, there are things I'm worried about and a lot going on. And I have felt a lot of overwhelm lately and I felt that lump in my throat and I'm just like, am I going to cry? I like can't even identify the actual thing that I would be crying about, but just like in general, I just wasn't there and I was thinking about all the things that I've got to do and I've got to get done. And I literally just like stopped myself and I was like, okay, like Ashley, what do you need right now? Which is something that I try to do that I feel like we were never taught. Another thing, because you don't think about yourself and
Same.
your own needs. And the first thing was meditation. I was going to skip because I had a bunch to do and I was like I'm going to do this. Like I'm going to do this and then my future self today will thank me for it. And it really did like reset my mind by doing that. I don't know if it's part of that is just like the self-love, but it's healing. To me, it's like such a gift because you don't need any tools for it. You can literally do that anywhere. And so I think it's super special.
Yeah, I love it. I'm glad that you said that about waking up in the funk because I think that happens to me half of the days, like, in my
Yeah.
life still. It's like there are some days it's like, I don't know exactly what's wrong, but I feel wrong, like,
Yeah.
been out of shape.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something that and, like, uh, it's almost like you really can't it feels like you can't do this exclusively or everybody can't do it. Maybe that's not true. It feels like it's impossible as a all the time long term sort of thing, but slowing down
Mhm.
so you're not
Mhm.
so overwhelmed feels really important to me. And again, it's like, I don't know, it's tough, like, when you run your own business and you have a kid and, like, it seems like there's always way too many things to do. And so I'm really
Right.
trying to be intentional about, like you just said, paying attention to what you need. Like,
Mhm.
we weren't taught was okay, but stepping back and realizing, like, yeah, maybe it would be better for business if I were, like, hustling all day, every day, and I would be building a bigger, more successful company faster. But that doesn't feel okay for me for what I can deal with mentally and
Yeah.
stress wise while because you've got different margins based on the load that you're carrying, right? And
Yeah.
there's other stuff at different times to carry. And shoot, there's the past several years of it's felt pretty heavy.
Mhm.
So I've tried, man, this is a balancing act, but tried to be more intentional about slowing down the amount of demands I let get imposed on me
Mhm.
in order to not be waking up feeling that overwhelmed every day. And maybe I'm half successful in it, maybe a little less, but it's better than not trying at all, I guess. It does help.
Yeah. And the cool thing about meditation is you can do a 5 minute if that's all you've got. And then I think that sets you up better for the whole rest of the day. I hate to sound like it's like, you know, the magic pill, but it really does
Yeah.
help. So like when you're building your business and you're talking about hustling and all of these things, you might not have time when you wake up in a funk for a 45-minute workout right then, but you probably have 5 minutes or 10 minutes to sit in silence and like give that to yourself, like give that to your nervous system, and you're going to be probably more productive after that, or a better person to be around, for your employees and whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. You just made me realize I haven't tried it longer than 13 minutes yet. And now I want to know what it would feel like to do 45 minutes.
you know, um, there is research that supports 30-minute. And there's resources, or sorry, there's research that supports meditation, just, period. But there is something that happens at the 30-minute mark. I need to look up that research, but there are measurable health benefits to that. So I always try to aim for 30. If I don't have it, I do what I have.
I think one of the reasons I've been successful with it is because
Hmm.
I was aware of the research that shows tremendous benefit just from doing 5 or 10 minutes. And so I went
Hmm.
into it with like, if I get five or
Yeah.
10 minutes, like I did it. And so that's all
Yeah.
I've done.
Yep.
But now that I'm kind of hooked, I totally would bite off more for like 30 on days that I have time, the weekend for sure.
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you think it's do you think it's kind of like, I mean, the way I've this is probably not the healthiest way, but the way I viewed a lot of things like exercise, even if it's like going for a walk or doing a little tiny set with free weights or whatever it is, um, like doing it for 10 minutes is 10 minutes more than I had been doing it kind of
Yeah.
point of view, or it's
Oh,
like
absolutely.
you could
Mhm.
say like it's not very much. It's like, well, it's more than I was because I was doing 0%. So now I'm doing something every day that is building towards being better, feeling better, like whatever it is. Do you kind of view it that way? Because it sounded like if you start off with the benchmark being like 5 minutes is a good start. Like that sounds like something anybody
You know
could
what?
do, you know?
That totally works though. Like there's tremendous benefit to that. I have 2 examples that, like I love Jordan Peterson, and that's one of the things that he's preached to his clients forever is like, "Oh, you have this huge problem in your life that you can't even look at or face, like it's this dragon that you can't deal with." He was like, "It's a stack of papers, like you're not on top of your finances for 10 years." He was like, "Make a deal with yourself that you'll walk downstairs today and look at the stack of papers for 30 seconds. You can do that." It's like,
Yeah.
and once you've done that, like, you've removed some of this mental obstacle of like, "Oh, I can't do anything." And the next time the deal with yourself is that you'll pick up a few of them and spend 3 minutes sorting a couple things into different stacks, right? And it's like you do that across time. And I think it was, Peter Attia, the, MD,
Mhm.
who
Mhm.
wrote,
Outlive.
Outlive was his book, right?
Mhm.
I
Yep.
think it was him on a podcast talking about someone, a friend of his that, made, like, tremendous long-term success, which is rare, with losing, like, 200 pounds or something. It wasn't like a
Mhm.
quick lose it all and then gain it back, and he said he made this contract with himself for the first 30 days. All he was gonna do was show up at the gym, walk in, and I think step on the treadmill for, like, 60 seconds and get off and leave, and he wouldn't let himself do anything else, and, like, he taught his brain I can show up on a habit and do this, and, like, it's not bad. And once he
Mhm.
had that down, then it was no big deal to add stuff on top of it. It's like you didn't do anything for 60 seconds, like, it was no benefit. It was strictly, I conquered my brain's, roadblocks to like, "Oh, I can't do this. This is gonna be hard," or whatever. It's like you built a pathway, a neural pathway that you could then follow and build upon. So, maybe that's the deal with meditation. I don't think there's no way I would have gotten into it if I had to be 30 minutes a day.
Do you think that through a lot of this kind of internal work, not just the meditation with the therapy and what you're doing in the time in between, like maybe this is too broad of a question. I don't even know exactly how to ask it, but have you found um, kind of glimpses maybe into what your natural disposition would be just about life versus maybe what your nurture position has been? Does that make sense? Kind of like what you've been taught versus maybe what you're just naturally would do and how you would
No,
respond to things?
it make it makes a lot of sense, and it's a question I've really wrestled with for a long time because that was one of, like, I feel like it was first handful of sessions. It was probably 4 years ago. Early on, the first therapist I ever met with, like, asked me, like, "Who are you?" And you can't answer with, a role. So you can't answer with a
Yeah.
business owner, husband, father, what you do for work. None of these things are valid answers. And I still have absolutely no idea how to answer that question. I don't know. Like, if you strip the roles as an answer, I'm like, I don't know. But, and so in addition to that, there's this, yeah, directly to your question, I've wondered, like, what are my inherent personality traits that weren't trained into you or picked up on by learning or whatever? And I don't think I would have very much success at figuring anything like that out without Elise, because I can see so many things in her that's like a copycat version of me, and I can be like, "Wait a minute, she's untouched," mostly because, like I said, there's still this science and research, questioning, like, the genetic, uh, passing, things down like trauma, so I still don't know, like, what effect that can have, but I can see things like being really talkative, right? Or really inquisitive or wanting or like this bent towards, critical thinking and curiosity and trying to figure out a better way to do something. Like I can see certain traits in her and like ways of functioning mentally. I'm like, that's just like me. And that's probably something that's inherent to me before the world touches you, right? Like just the way you come into it. So I feel very limited progress on discovering what do you, true self, to sound cliche. Uh,
Do you feel like you get close to that in meditation, though?
I don't think I'm there yet. I think in meditation, like I said, it's a 38, 39-day streak now.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I what I've got, and I don't say handle on like mastered, but what I've touched in meditation is an ability to detach from thoughts some and slow down and
Mhm.
be present. But that hasn't sunk to a level of who am I? Like you mentioned is it Deepak, something chakra.
Chopra.
The 3 questions. I don't know his thing.
Four soul
That was a
questions.
good try.
The 4 soul the 4 soul questions.
Bop.
You know, I'm I'm ba Oompa
Let's play some
Oompa
Hanson right
Loompa.
now.
Um,
No,
yeah, the 4 soul questions.
the four soul
I
questions.
don't
Yeah.
I don't ask myself those. It's intimidating to me. I've
Well,
tried
he
it.
always says, like, when you say, "Who am I?" He'll say, "Well, step into the presence of being, and that's who you are." As in, basically, what you've been saying, the conscious observer, the one that was I'm making it sound like uh, we have different personalities, and that's not what I mean, but the essence of you, like you just said, before the world indoctrinated you or your parents or whatever, with beliefs and thoughts and opinions and all of that, it's that part of you is still present. Um, that's that's how I answer that question for myself. It doesn't mean I'm always in touch with that. um, but I also like the practice of asking the question without even trying to give it an answer. And that's the whole point of like the four soul questions is you just ask. It's like you're asking the question and you're not trying to come up with an answer. If something does pop into your head, great, but if it doesn't, it doesn't. But it's something about like getting your subconscious, like your wheels turning, if that makes sense.
It does some. Yeah, it does some, but yeah, that one's still new for me. I, uh, I think some stuff like that is a lot harder the more of an overthinker you are,
Yeah.
because that's how what I thought was so cool, how the containment method works is you're supposed to ask your nervous system, like your brain,
Mhm.
give me a visual object that encompasses this cult experience and all of this
Yeah. Yeah.
drama or whatever the
Yeah.
situation is. And then for an overthinker, your immediate response is, well, why did I see a ship? Like what the ship can't be right. Like that's not the right thing. I just made that up. And then the answer is you couldn't have just made it up. Like it did what you wanted it to do. Like it produced
Mhm.
something. It's you overthinking and questioning it that kind of ruins that. And so you just have to accept what appears.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a cool concept that I think I've just recently kind of been starting to learn is like, well, the fact that there's something there, like if
Mhm.
an answer does pop up, if you just ask,
Mhm.
then you didn't just produce it or make it up. Like it. I don't know. This is starting to sound weird, right?
No.
Um, but like it just materialized. Like, what are we dealing with here? But there's something to that you can really easily just, like, kinda walk all over with overthinking and kinda trash it, but, um, there's there's an ability there you kinda have to learn how to accept, I guess.
Yeah.
That sounds dumb. I don't know what I'm
No, it
talking about.
doesn't. It doesn't.
Um,
Does your therapist ever ask you, like, does she do body scans just kind of like, what are you feeling right now? Like, if you're talking about something that's difficult, does she ask you if you feel that somewhere in your body?
so I meet with Naomi, and
Mhm.
there's with her organization, like it's across state lines, and
Yeah.
it can't technically be therapy. So there's like
Yeah.
limits to the type of therapy that I do now.
Mhm.
A lot of what I do now is just like standard cognitive behavioral, like talk it out type stuff.
Yeah.
But the therapist I met with in Arkansas, we did that a lot. So we did EMDR, which was really
Yeah.
cool, and I
Mhm.
responded really well to. And
Mhm.
then we did body scans almost at the end of every session. And
Yeah.
I was kind of blown away at how being walked through that
Mhm.
helps, like how relaxing that is. And I'm hyper aware most of the time of what's going on with what I'm feeling emotionally and physically. That's something else I see in Elise is there's just this tremendous awareness of this body part feels like this, or this is hurting, or whatever. So I'm very aware of like where I'm carrying tension and these sorts of
Right.
things. Oh, and that's another thing I do really regularly that's similar but different. Yoga nidra or non-sleep deep
Yeah.
rest.
Mhm.
So that involves, I don't know if it's technically a body scan, but it's very similar to a body scan where you just deliberately focus your attention on running through each
Relaxing.
part of your
Mhm.
body. Yeah. That's given me I've been doing that for a few years.
Mhm.
That's given me a much greater ability to like stop and relax and reset a little bit. Just
Yeah.
conscious relaxation is pretty difficult,
Yeah.
but feels way, way, way easier now.
Well, when you were talking about the containment method, I was thinking about how, you know, sometimes when I'm talking about something difficult, my therapist will say, let's stop for a second. Like, do you feel that anywhere in your body? And it's interesting because that isn't something that I had really ever thought of before that. And now we do that often. And so I'm much more in tune with where I'm feeling different stresses. And it's interesting how, one will be like, well, actually, that's like in my throat, or this one's in my stomach, or this is in my heart center. And then she will always ask me, like, what does it look like? Does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Those kinds of things, like you just said with like the boat, you thought of a boat, or a ship. And I find that to be like a really interesting thing to, because sometimes it does have a shape or a color, and then I'm visualizing it in a contained way, going back to the containment method. Um and and it is a little bit like, probably not exactly the containment method, but it's almost like I can look at that and visualize that object that is holding that emotion and those experiences. And when I'm done talking about that in session and I need to go do something else, in a sense, I am putting that on a shelf
It
and
sounds like
saying, I'm
almost the
coming
exact same
back.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, it's a temporary holding space. That's the big part of the containment method, is like, this is not meant to stay like filed away in a vault. No, like you got to go back and get it off the shelf and deal with it. What's next, boys?
Oh, sorry. I've been meditating this entire time. So
Good
I
for
don't know what you
you.
guys have been talking about.
Matt is like, I am the all-knowing consciousness, one consciousness over here.
If you like this episode, please go leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever that is. If it's Apple, Spotify, or another service, it's really helpful. And don't forget to subscribe so that you can get notified when we have new episodes and updates and things like that. Thanks, and we'll talk to you all again next week.